Good afternoon and welcome to Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light Caring for Creation program with Southwest and Southeast Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light, or PA IPL. Wonderful to be with you today, Friday, November 4th, 2022, in our lunchtime session. PA IPL is generously funded to bring you this series of environmental education sessions by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. We have a wonderful project advisor from the DEP called Kathleen Dansky, and we work with her closely. We also have partners in various parts of the state that help us distribute this message. In southwestern Pennsylvania, we work with Ballfield Farm, Garfield Community Farm, which are both wonderful organic urban farms in dense urban areas, Valley View Presbyterian Church, the Perry Hilltop and Fineview Citizens Councils, the First United Methodist Church of Germantown, known as FUMCOG in the Philadelphia area. And today we're partnering with St. Paul's Episcopal Church to bring you our session from their wonderful lounge. If you can see behind me, this historic church is graciously hosting us in this beautiful setting. A little bit about Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light. We really are an organization that seeks to inspire and mobilize people of faith to take bold and just action on climate justice. We are, the reasons that we do that are many and varied. Primarily, our present circumstances demand action. We're witnessing the loss of nature and the spread of human suffering at unprecedented levels. And as people and organizations of faith, our sacred texts and moral values require us to protect creation and pursue justice. Our actions, when taken together, can engender hope and motivate change in personal and community behavior and in public policy. By joining me today, you're taking one of the first steps to being active in this movement. And we appreciate your time and your contributions to our joint mission. Sorry, my laptop's not always responding. There we go. In any form of waste reduction, you can definitely make a difference. You can help the world to make a better place by reducing waste at home, in your congregations, in your workplaces, in any organization that you are a partner with. We certainly do not want our beautiful Pennsylvania landscape to become littered with landfills like the ones that you see here in the photograph. I have a story to relate to you about traveling back and forth from Pennsylvania or Chicago to New York City when I was a young person living in New York. My husband and I used to drive across Staten Island. And basically in those days, the landfill rules were worse than they are now. This is in the 80s. And we would drive through areas where the waste was piled so high on either side of the roadway that we felt like we were driving through the Poconos, for example, or driving through roads cut through mountaintops. But it wasn't beautiful stone and wildlife and plants, it was waste. And seagulls would fly in and out, taking the waste, and it just had a horrible odor. You had to shut your windows and turn on your internal air conditioning in order to survive the trip across Staten Island. So we certainly don't want the beautiful land, air, and water resources that we have in Pennsylvania to become littered in that way. And you can help. What we need to do is go back to what I refer to as a conservation mentality. Many people have an understanding of what that is. They may just not recognize it as that word. If any of you were raised by Depression-era parents and grandparents, as I was, you might remember the way we used to talk about reduce, reuse, recycle was a little more complicated. We use this adage: use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. Has anyone heard that?
Not exactly, but
something close. Yeah. Feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself and dive in with a story we love to collect stories as part of these education sessions. So does anyone remember saying, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without? My mother still uses this term if we're having a family meal and we tend to be running out of spaghetti and meatballs or potato salad, whatever the food might be. I'll often hear her say, oh, we'll just make it do, Kathy, we'll make it do. And she's just going back to a time in our past when we had more of a conservation mentality. Has anyone ever heard the term cradle to cradle or read the book Cradle to Cradle by Michael Braungart and his partner? Anyone want to raise their hand there? William McDonough and Michael Braungart. In the recent past, we've designed and purchased and used materials with more of a cradle to grave mentality, where we purchase something that probably doesn't have a very long life, and we use it up, and when we're finished, we throw it away and it goes to landfill. But one day, Michael Braungart and William McDonough were talking together about the idea that we should be using more of a cradle to cradle mentality, which is just the same as a conservation mentality. Basically, it builds on the concept that in nature, there is no waste. If you think a moment about what happens when a tree falls in the forest, it doesn't go to landfill, does it? If anyone wants to chip in, feel free. When the tree falls in the forest, it decays and it becomes a home for forest creatures, for insects, for fungi, for all different types of species that we share the earth with. And that's the kind of mentality that we need to bring back into our lives in order to save ourselves and the planet. Oh, and sorry, when we develop this conservation mentality, we also not only preserve waste, but we reduce all of the embodied energy and the greenhouse gas emissions that are embodied in the products that we purchase and use and then throw away, which in turn preserves our precious air, water, and land resources. You can look at waste reduction in two ways. We have upstream solutions and we have downstream solutions. Upstream solutions tend to be those that are more effective because their focus here is not to generate the waste in the first place. You can really get to the source of the waste and cut it off before it becomes wasteful. You get to the source of the problem by bringing core issues to light. We can do this as consumers by investigating the products and the manufacturers that we work with or purchase from. They can make a bigger difference by manufacturing products that have the longest life possible. They can alter the product design and the product delivery to reduce packaging. And in the product design, they can just take products back so that they can be disassembled to be recycled into the technological waste stream or into the biological waste stream. I often refer to a chair that's made by Herman Miller to describe this a little in greater detail. It's called the Aeron chair, and it's been available in the commercial office market for 25 or 30 years. And the Aeron chair has a very long life. It's really designed to be used for 25 years or more. And when the chair is at the end of its life, Herman Miller takes it back and they take it apart. They can even compost the foam padding in the chair and the fabric on the chair because they're made from natural materials, not from foam that's made from petroleum products. So it can all be composted, and then all the nuts and bolts and screws and metal and plastic parts are either used on new chairs or they're recycled through their factory into making new parts for new chairs. So that's the type of example that we'd like to use when we're investigating products to buy and using them and purchasing them. I used to work in the building design industry, and there are a number of green building rating systems that guide designers and builders in their purchasing decisions. You can really look to organizations like the USGBC, the U.S. Green Building Council, True Waste for zero waste certifications, et cetera. And at the heart of all of this decision making and planning is the idea that we need to conserve. Now, downstream solutions are really those that we use to solve the problems once the waste exists. One way to look at downstream solutions is to do a waste audit of your facility. I'm a true zero waste auditor, so I can help you with that if you would like to look at how your waste is created and where how we can take your facility to a zero waste facility. And I can help you with waste audits to help you do that. At the heart of this downstream concept is also conservation. I work with a small group here in Mount Lebanon called the Mount Lebanon Environmental Team, or Lebo Green, and we've come up with a group of R's that we call them the 7 R's. Instead of just reduce, reuse, and recycle, we've come up with some upstream R's. First of all, refuse, where we really work primarily with single-use plastic right now. When you're out for dinner or purchasing something, you can just say no to plastic bags, to straws, to plastic containers for food, to plastic plates and knives and forks and spoons. And we can work on a grassroots effort to push manufacturers to redesign products. So we only purchase the ones that we know are going to be less wasteful. Growing up, I remember when there was a grassroots movement to reduce pesticide use in farming, where mothers primarily in those days were the ones doing the food purchasing for the family. They refused to buy grapes because the farmers, the big ag farmers who were growing grapes, were actually spraying the fields with pesticides while the workers were in the field, really causing health problems for those workers, and then also for the people who purchased and ate the grapes after they were purchased. We had the same type of movement with tuna when they were not using dolphin-safe nets. People just refused to buy tuna, and as a result, we now have dolphin-safe tuna, or at least it's better than it used to be. There is still some bycatch involved with any kind of seafood fishing, but we did make a difference. So I encourage you to take that grassroots approach whenever you're investigating what you would like to use, purchase, and use your conservation mentality that way. And then we can reduce. We just, as a society, buy too much stuff. We just have too much stuff. We can be happier as we were during the Depression era with that one pair of shoes instead of 10 pairs of shoes. When I was growing up, we had a pair of play shoes, a pair of school shoes, a pair of church shoes. And we bought those once a year and we wore them until they wore out. So that's kind of the mentality that I'm describing. Would anyone like to share some stories of their childhood and how they had a conservation mentality back then?
If I may, I mean, I grew up in the 50s and 60s in Germany. So my parents experienced quite a bit of scarcity, and there was never any waste of food. And as you said, clothing, shoes, toys. I mean, I grew up eventually then was a solid middle class family, so we had no more dire needs or anything, nothing lacking. But there was no single-use plastic in use in those days. That has changed now, of course, but there's still quite a big system of deposit bottles, and that's a big waste thing and single-use plastic origin. Even nowadays, I mean, you can get your yogurt in glass containers and all that and take it back to the supermarket.
Or make your own.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I guess when Helga and I were growing up, there was no such thing as plastic containers. We had glass. We called it Depression era glass. Well, now they call it Depression era glass.
Yeah.
We just called it glass container. We didn't have Tupperware, and when you went to buy things, it didn't come in plastic. It was wrapped in paper or wrapped in a reusable sack that you would bring home with you. My grandmother shopped with a basket.
Oh, yeah.
She carried a basket. Yeah.
There was nothing else. And I remember the milk cans out of metal that you just got out of the pump like a soda fountain, got the milk dispensed.
Yeah, I'm happy to say that I've seen more supermarket milk available in glass jars where you can pay a deposit for the bottle and then you bring it back and it's filled up again. We had a milkman, but I guess we should call him a milk person, but in those days he was called a milkman. And he drove a truck from his farm to our house and he brought eggs and milk and small bits of produce, not as complicated as one of the CSAs that you might purchase today, but he made a weekly delivery to our house. Yeah. We should get back to that. That's part of the reduction R. Then if we looked at the reuse R, does anyone have any stories about how they reuse things at home? I have many friends who take their glass jars that they purchase and turn them into drinking glasses, flower vases. They make overnight oats in them by mixing their oatmeal with their yogurt or milk in the refrigerator and leaving them overnight in the fridge to be ready for the morning. Ways to reuse things in the garden and in the home and office. And then we always encourage people to re-earth or compost, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And at the very end, at the end of all of these 5 R's is only when you should think about recycling, because our recycling programs, as you'll see a little bit later, have gotten quite confusing, quite disparate, and we're not exactly sure what is being recycled and what's not being recycled these days. And finally, the 7th R is role model. So we're hoping that even you'll learn even more after today, and you feel free to reach out to me with questions at 412-953-5202 or outreach@paipl.org, and I'll be happy to help you find solutions for waste problems that you might have, because we want you to be a role model, and that's the 7th most important R. You're taking the first step in the role model phase today. If you do conduct your own home waste audit or office or congregational audit, you need to take a great deal of care wearing goggles, protective gloves, and protective boots so that you don't step on anything that might be sharp, pierce your skin, and cause an infection. But the way we do this is just filtering through the trash one item by one item, separating it into different piles or different buckets, and weighing those buckets to see what percentage of the different types of waste you have in your own personal waste stream. We separate that out in terms of food, plastic, aluminum or metal, glass, paper, cardboard, and other waste streams, depending on who and where you're located. And then after the audit, we can focus in on what is the priority, what's your biggest source of waste. Find the ways to reduce that most effectively, and then go through as the priorities decrease down the line. And then at the very end, recycle per the current rules for your particular location. So at home, in your own backyard, there are some things you can definitely do quickly. This happens to be a photo of beautiful Ballfield Farm on the north side of Pittsburgh. Hopefully I'll get out to the Philadelphia, Scranton, and Central PA or Lancaster areas to have some photos of similar locations there. One of the biggest things you can do to help us is just say no to single-use plastic. That means no plastic shopping bags, no straws, no plastic bottles or mugs or cups, no plastic cutlery, and no plastic wrap. There actually are a number of ways you can reduce those. Even in dryer sheets and personal care products like scrubbing bath and body lotion, there are plastic microbeads, which are dangerous. They've been outlawed in many states, but I don't believe it's a nationwide law that eliminates them. If you want to have a scrubbing abrasive substance in your body products, then you look for something that's made with walnut shells or apricot kernels. And even chewing gum has bits of plastic in it. So try to eliminate food products like that have plastic, which are incredibly harmful for you, and then help us to reduce our air and water and land pollution too. Wearing clothes that are made out of recycled plastic has become very popular because they are popular in sports attire and leggings and comfortable clothes, but those are all made from recycled plastic or petroleum-based products, such as polyester, nylon, and other synthetic clothing. So when we wash those, it's a great idea to try to recycle the plastic and make it into clothes. But when we do that, itty bitty pieces of plastic go down the drain into the water treatment system and eventually are released to the rivers and streams and get into the ocean. So almost every creature on the planet, even sea salt, has tiny bits of plastic in it. And so we're ingesting that when we use the salt or when we eat the sea creatures, since we're at the top of the food chain. So some ways that we can do that is we can carry our own reusable shopping bags, our own reusable serviceware or tableware, which would include straws, cutlery, bottles, mugs, and cups. Or you can go back to paper straws that might be compostable in your own personal compost bin or a commercial composting facility. And please try to remember to request no plastic straws and cutlery in a restaurant or takeout situations. You can also purchase those plastic-free household and personal care products that we mentioned, and try to go back to natural fibers like linen and cotton or hemp, because they use less water, particularly hemp, and they're not synthetic, so they're not contributing to the plastics in our water supply. We can also reduce packaging in store and online. Again, use that grassroots purchasing power to encourage manufacturers or supermarkets to not put their produce in or their products in 10 different types of bag and box and plastic film. Try to go to your local farmers market. We're fortunate here in the South Hills of Pittsburgh to have a number of farmers markets several times a week. So we probably can buy our produce in season by taking our own bags and baskets to these markets, supporting our local farmers, and then reducing the waste and the embodied energy that's required to send that produce to market. We can also, there's a store here in the Squirrel Hill area called the Refillery, and these are becoming more popular across the country, particularly the state of Pennsylvania, where you take your own bottles and jugs and jars to a store that offers a personal care products, soaps and bathroom shampoos and scrubs and dishwashing liquid. So you can refill it in your own container, or they provide a container for you. They're not necessarily more expensive than buying in the supermarket. Sometimes they are, but as they become more popular, I think the price will go down. So if we support them, then we can help to reduce the price and make it more affordable for everybody. If you order quite a bit online, you can often click a box that allows you to receive your packages in one delivery if you're ordering more than one item at a time. So if the warehouse that you're ordering from does not have all of the products in the warehouse at the time they ship, they'll ship them all separately. But by clicking this box, you can ask them to hold all of the products until they're all available and then ship them to you just one time. So that reduces packaging and also the fossil fuel used in the delivery of those products. And there's just one more that I could think of for us, was to really eliminate plastic wrap and aluminum foil by working with beeswax products. There are options where you can coat fabric circles and squares with beeswax and then use those in place of plastic wrap and aluminum foil. Of course, they can't be exposed to heat, but then you can wash those and keep them in the drawer, similar to the way you would keep the lids for your containers or your plastic bags. Does anybody have any stories they'd like to share on reducing single-use plastics or packaging? Feel free to just unmute yourself and chime in. I think we've covered all of these where we purchase loose and bulk items, farmers markets, carry your own containers, store food and household items in reusable plastic, BPA-free, or preferably glass containers. And then purchase your food and household items in glass that is reusable or recyclable. And also, we're going to talk a little bit later about donating items. You can also purchase from donation stores like Habitat for Humanity and Goodwill because you keep them alive, and you also are reusing items that have less embodied energy and less waste than buying new products. Always shopping locally from local crafters, suppliers, manufacturers, and farmers is more effective as well. Now, when we move to donation, if you cannot reuse or recycle something before you throw it into the landfill, consider donating it to your local Habitat for Humanity or Goodwill. I'll be sharing this presentation with all of you via PDF, but you can see the long list of bullet points we have here that Habitat for Humanity takes. Even appliances, HVAC, plumbing and electrical equipment and fixtures, lawn and garden products, roofing products, unused paint. So much more than just clothing can be donated there, and someone will be ready to reuse that product, save it from the landfill. Goodwill also has a number of products that you might not think are available for purchase there, such as kitchenware, dishes and pans, linens and towels, along with the clothing that we typically take to Goodwill. Please note that Goodwill will take all fiber-based clothing. It doesn't have to be necessarily saleable. They don't sell the clothing that might be damaged by holes or tears or stains, but they will take that fiber and they will shred it to be used in other products such as insulation for buildings and other types of weaving clothing and fill for concrete and building materials. So there's a lot of uses for things that we don't ordinarily think of, that we can save them from landfill and find a home for them where they can get used at least one more time. Nike Shoes is still operating a program called Nike Grind. Here in southwestern Pennsylvania, we can collect any type of shoe that doesn't have cleats or spikes or metal grommets on them. It can be from any manufacturer, and we can drive them to a Nike location. So oftentimes schools and neighborhood organizations work on this kind of project where you drive boxes and boxes and boxes full of shoes. Particularly schools are popular because children grow out of their shoes frequently and they wear them out to the point where they can't really be donated anymore. But Nike will take them back and grind them into playground material and material that's used in playground equipment, that sort of item. But you can't take sandals, dress shoes, or boots. And then with your food waste, if your food waste is a big part of your waste stream, I strongly encourage you to compost. If you can, in your backyard, you can do this with a standard composting bin. If you live in an apartment, you can even compost using worms. It's called vermicomposting. There are vermicompost bins that are small enough to store under your kitchen sink. And the worms eat the vegetable scraps fairly quickly, and then they produce a bit of a tea that you can draw off from the vermicomposter, and you can use it to water your house plants or your garden plants. So there are a lot of benefits to vermicomposting. You do have to keep them indoors, however, because they will freeze in a smaller container over the winter time. And there are a number of ways that you can learn about composting beyond our workshop today. The Pennsylvania Resources Council, or PRC, has a Western and an Eastern office. They conduct online workshops and in-person workshops through which you will obtain a wonderful bin, composting bin, like the one you see on the far right in the photograph. We're partnering with the PRC on this program to make these compost bins available to those who live in environmental justice communities or who are financially disadvantaged. So if you're having a difficult time with finances at this time, if you're on a fixed income and you can't afford the $110 that this bin would typically cost, if you register for a PRC workshop, we are offering these for free as part of the grant. I still have a few available either in Eastern or Western Pennsylvania. I haven't determined a way to make them available in NEPA or the Lancaster region yet, but that may come next year if our grant is extended. But we've managed to give away 26 of these bins in the Pittsburgh region, and I want to grow that number as much as possible over the next coming years. There are also, if you can afford to pay a monthly fee, now I can't, so I compost on my own in my backyard, but there are a number of groups in Western and Eastern Pennsylvania. In the Pittsburgh area, we have the Compost People and the Zero Waste Wrangler. And in Philadelphia, we have Circle Compost and Bennett Compost. So these are organizations that provide you with a 5-gallon bucket, typically, that you put your food waste in over the course of a week, and then you put your bucket out by the curb on the special day that they pick up. They provide you with a clean bucket and they take the composted bucket away. So if you don't have room, if you're in an apartment, or if you don't have the energy to devote to composting, then you can pay for a pickup program that runs between $10 and $35 a month. So it can be pricey. And then Pittsburgh has a group called Shady Side Worms, and Philadelphia has Circle Compost that does vermicomposting. And we can look into providing vermicomposting bins for smaller facilities, smaller homes in the near future. Basically, when you compost, you're creating a mini ecosystem. There are requirements for this mini ecosystem to thrive, and those are air, moisture, food, and warmth. Basically, we're providing the air that allows the microorganisms and fungi to grow by ventilating the compost bin. If you look at the bin we'll be using, you can see vent spaces down below. They're vertical slots on the bottom of the bin, and then the same types of vertical slots exist on the top of the bin. So if you just put your food waste into that bin and leave it there for approximately 1 year, it will turn into beautiful, nutritious compost for your vegetable or lawn garden. If you use a shovel or a tool, an aeration tool, to turn the compost within the bin, you're going to make compost a little bit faster, sometimes as fast as 1 month. So I usually take a shovel and I thrust it into the bin, in the center of the bin, and I move it back and forth and left and right. So you're not really turning the compost within the bin, you're just breaking it up a little bit and providing air, the opportunity for air to move down through the layers, encouraging those microorganisms to thrive. You can't allow your compost bin to dry out, so it's best not to put it in a very sunny area. In a partially shady area or fully shady area is the best plan. When you look in there, if the compost feels moist when you touch it, then it's probably fine. If it's lumping together and starting to have a terrible odor, then it's probably a little too moist. But you want to keep it at about like a 60% moisture content. So you don't have to really measure that. You can do it by sight. It's really, if it just looks like it's moist and healthy, then it's good to go. Then you have to give it the organic materials that the microorganisms will break down. And they will more or less create their own warmth. There will be all sorts of critters in there. We want to protect against rodents. but we will be inviting worms and fungi and beetles and protozoans and all sorts of microorganisms. If you do have vermicomposters, then you please remember to bring those inside during the winter. The active decay actually creates warmth, and those that are most susceptible, like the worms, will probably go back down into the ground after the compost, as the weather gets cold, so that they don't freeze. They have their own protection mechanisms. I'm going to go backwards just a little bit to show you the bin again. So the bin actually does not have a bottom on it. And you can see there's sort of a little bit of a drawer on the bottom. This is actually a door that slides up. And so you will take the lid off and put your compost in the top. And then as it decays and becomes healthy compost, you'll be able to slide the door up and remove that compost from the bottom. But when we provide these, we provide a layer of hardware cloth, which is a 1/2-inch grid of metal wire underneath the bin. And then we stake these down through the cloth through 4 holes at the bottom of the bin. And this hardware cloth keeps rodents from tunneling underneath and up into the bin. So particularly in dense urban areas, it's important to keep rodent populations down in backyards. So that's why we provide the hardware cloth to make that work for us. So some of the compostable materials you can put in are the kind of, easy things that you have in your kitchen. You can use garden trimmings too, plant trimmings and grass clippings, as long as those are not diseased. So if you have a blight or a fungus or something like black spot on your roses or something like that, you don't want to put those in your compost bin, because at home, our compost bins aren't going to build up enough of the heat temperature required to kill those diseases, those plant diseases. And weeds, they will not kill weeds or weed seeds either. So you want to keep weeds and diseased plants out. But healthy garden trimmings and green grass clippings can go in as green products. And then veggie kitchen scraps, any sort of kitchen scrap can go right in there. A few eggshells can go in there, not an enormous number of eggshells. We don't, especially if you're not sure if your eggs are going to have salmonella or something like that. And coffee grounds. Coffee grounds are considered to be in the green category, even though they are brown. So those are the greens, what we call the greens. And then below the coffee grounds, you see the browns, the dried leaves or dried grass, dried straw or hay, shredded unbleached paper, and cardboard are what we call the browns. I'm going to skip ahead one slide. So basically, you're looking to have 1/3 greens and 2/3 browns within your bin. At the base of the bin, you want to collect some twigs from your yard and just overlap them, kind of like a grid, maybe about 1 inch of twigs. And then above that, you can start right in with your greens. You don't have to put soil on top of that. Some people do, just to bring some extra microorganisms in. But you can go directly into your browns, which would be your straw, your shredded cardboard, your hay, your dried grass, and your leaves. Then you want to look and see if you need a little bit of water in there, and then you can spray it with a hose or pour a little bit from a kitchen container, and then go back to your greens and browns and greens and browns. I've never filled up my compost bin with a family of 4, so the bin is more than large enough to take all that you need for the average family. What you don't want to put in a home compost bin would be items such as oil and fat and grease, meat and fish and dairy, any of your weeds gone to seed, or any of your diseased plants. Definitely no cat and dog waste, because they are meat eaters and they might have parasites. You don't want to put in lime, because that's going to upset your balance, your pH balance in the bin. No wood ash, because I believe that is very alkaline. And no leaves or twigs from trees that are allelopathic, such as the black walnut. Those are organisms that create, they put an enzyme into the soil that prohibits any other kind of plant from growing there. So that's why typically when you see walnuts, they grow in a grove because nothing else can get close to them because they're allelopathic. Does anyone have any questions on composting so far? Okay.
I just want to comment. I'm a pretty sloppy composter. I have like a wire wood enclosure by the back porch. It's very easy then to just step out the kitchen door and throw things in. But the result of being a sloppy composter is that occasionally you get this volunteer squash or tomato.
Yeah, but that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Then you get an extra fall harvest that you weren't planning on. We had some acorn squash this year, and they were very good. Yeah, it's kind of fun to see what happens in your bin. It's actually, in some ways, the best way to compost is just have a wood bin or a chicken wire circle out in your backyard that you can just throw things in. That way the rain keeps it wet, the air gets to it naturally. Unfortunately, in some urban areas, it's a little more difficult. The tighter you get, you don't want to have decay or rodents or a little bit of odor that your neighbors might complain about. So that's why we tend to go with the bins. But when you have a larger site or you're in a suburb or a rural area, it's wonderful to just have a huge pile of compost. The larger the pile, the higher the temperature gets. So it actually steams in the wintertime. Do you ever see, Helga, that your compost pile steams?
I don't think it's that big. It's just like maybe 6 by 3 or so. And it's high. Yeah, so it's just chicken wire and poles. But it's a small yard. You can see from the sidewalk, so you just kind of hide it behind shrubs a little bit. And I never noticed it stinking.
That's good.
Most of the time. But
do you aerate?
I do dig through with pitchfork occasionally, but not often. Probably not often enough.
Yeah, I'm a lazy composter. I don't aerate very often. And you can just leave it alone if you're a busy person. It just takes longer to actually make wonderful compost. For the fastest effect, you really just want to stir your pile every 5 to 7 days. You're trying to either move the material from the edges into the center or dig in a little with a pitchfork or a shovel to just move it around so it has the air has the ability to get down into the center. On the larger bins, the temperature can get as high as 140 degrees or so. And in your home bin, I would discourage you from putting in compostable serviceware like compostable cups and plates and spoons because we're not going to get high enough temperature there to break those down. But at Ballfield Farm or in Barfield Community Farm, they have fairly large piles. They're probably like 10 by 10 by 4. And if they have a gathering where we use compostable serviceware, that goes right in the compost bin too. And it breaks down relatively quickly at that size of a unit. After 4 weeks, if you're aerating every 5 to 7 days, you should probably allow the compost to rest for a few weeks before you use it. You can test the compost to see if it's ready in these ways. It should be dark brown and crumbly. It has a hummus-like texture, not the hummus that we eat, but I guess it's hummus-like texture. It should have a wonderful earthy smell. It should have a good smell, something that if it smells like something you wouldn't want to touch, then it needs a little more time to rest and cure, a little more time to decay. And you shouldn't see any recognizable organic materials like a piece of celery or a carrot or an apple slice. Unfortunately, I have a problem with avocado peels or skins. they never decay for me. They're like leather, sort of. And I still see them all the time. So I wouldn't worry too much about them. And most of your seeds and your seed pits, like an avocado seed or a peach pit or a larger pit type of seed, they're probably not going to break down either. But as Helga was saying, it's wonderful to see how the other seeds grow within your bin or within your pile. It's a lot of fun, actually. So you can do a bag test or a germination test also to see if your compost is ready to use. If you took a small paper bag or a plastic bag, although we shouldn't be using plastic, put it in a food container instead for 24 hours. And if when you open the container, you don't smell anything terrible, then the compost is probably ready to go. You can also take a bean seed, like a lima bean or some quickly germinating seed, and place that in a small dish with a little bit of the compost and a little moisture, kind of like an elementary school science project, and see if the seed germinates. So if the seed germinates, then the seed likes the compost, so it's ready to go. And now I do want to mention, this is the way where we wanted to maintain the moisture at 40 to 60%. You can squeeze the compost a little bit. If it stays together in a really tight ball, that's probably getting to be too wet. But if it won't hold together at all, then that's a little bit too dry. So it's you don't have to be a scientist about it. You'll kind of find your own way, and you really can't mess this up too badly. Any questions about composting? I see a few comments in the chat, so let me see. Oh, sorry, you had to run, Phil. Brian, you said you always wanted to try it, composting, but it's a little intimidating. I wouldn't worry about it so much. When I was putting together this presentation, I hesitated to give too much information. But as maybe Helga reassured you by saying she's a messy composter, and I hope I reassured you by saying I'm a lazy aerator. Basically, you just have to throw in your greens and your browns. In a worst case scenario, the compost is going to become anaerobic, which means it's gotten too wet and too messy, and then you just let it dry out and wait for a month or so, or throw in extra browns, especially during the fall leaf season. Just throw your leaves right in there, move them around a little bit, stir them around a little bit. It's really hard to completely mess it up.
I think there are also these barrel type of composting. Things that you just crank every now and then it gets mixed up. I've seen those around.
Those are popular. You have to be very strong, or buy a very expensive one. I made the mistake of purchasing one that sits on rollers, and so I rotate it. I have to physically roll it, lay my whole body on it, and roll it over. It got to the point where I couldn't roll it anymore. And I just had to let it sit there because it did go anaerobic, which means it was too wet. It didn't have enough aeration. It didn't have enough holes for air to get inside. So I had pretty much a slimy mess in there. So I just let it sit for a year or so and then took it out.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Pamela.
Yeah, I have a question. Well, I have a couple of questions. One, what do you do when the people who are supposed to be in the forefront of engaging in activities like recycling and composting are resistant to composting? As far as complaints that it smells or that it's too much work. So they're not encouraging, and this is the church, the congregants to engage in the practice and emphasizing that it's something that's much needed and that we should serve as role models.
Right. Do
The
you
other,
have a green team at your church currently?
I'm sorry, do we have a green team?
Yeah, a group of
No,
people.
we have a climate action team.
Okay. Well, climate action teams is pretty similar to the same idea. Maybe start with those folks first.
Well,
And
they're
then,
the people. They're the people.
oh,
that
they don't want to
seem
try.
resistant to it.
They're being a little bit resistant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a tried and true practice that's been with us since human beings began to farm. It's just something we've done forever, all through history. And if you follow the instructions that I've been passing along, chances are you're not going to have any odor, and chances are you're not going to have any trouble. You're not going to have, especially if you're doing it at church, you're not going to have that much food waste. You're probably going to have more browns than greens, so you will have to put in straw or dried leaves.
We're a small group.
Right.
And, some people think that it's too much work. But it's just, I mean, you do what you have to do. And we have one person who serves on the maintenance team. The other questions I have, I know it's way past 1 o'clock, is that will we get a copy of the slides, and how do we contact you if we?
Oh yes, please reach out to me via email or phone. My email address is outreach@paipl.org, and my phone number is 412-953-5202. I'd be happy to help. I'd be happy to talk to your group specifically if they would like a little more reassurance, and I can show them some examples of how people in our area have successfully composted. Me in particular, just as a small homeowner, and then the larger organizations like Ballfield Farm or Garfield Community Farm. Maybe Hal goes, but will send us a photo of her compost.
My connection unfortunately went out. Could you put your name and number in the chat?
Oh yes, certainly.
And will we get a copy? Will we get a copy of the slides?
Yeah, I definitely will send you a copy of the slides, and this recording will also be available.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Do you have to run? Great to meet you, Pamela. So I'm going to quickly go through. I think we've lost a few participants because unfortunately we are running overtime, but I'm going to continue with the recording so that everyone will have a chance to listen to the recycling portion, which is actually the most complicated portion. Unfortunately, about maybe in the 70s or 80s, as a nation, we started working with a process called single stream recycling rather than separated recycling. So what single stream is it means that all of your recycling materials go in the same bin. They used to go in a bag. All across the state now, I know for sure that we are no longer supposed to be putting bags into our recycling bins. And the reason is they are not recyclable and they tend to gum up the process. So they get caught in the wheels and the mechanisms of the recycling conveyor belt that aid in the recycling process. So this is a slide from the city of Pittsburgh, which invites you to reach out to them at pittsburghpa.gov, or their phone number is shown here. And they have distributed blue bins to residents and really require there's no plastic bags in there whatsoever. Also, the city of Philadelphia has a comprehensive recycling program where they're located on John F. Kennedy Boulevard, recycling office at phila.gov. and their phone numbers listed there. So again, I'll be sharing these slides with you, so you'll have these addresses and phone numbers for our far-reaching programs on either side of the state. There also are programs in Lancaster and Scranton, and I'd be happy to, in other areas, Harrisburg, Erie, all across the state. I'd be happy to work with anyone who needs additional information to find it on their local website. So reach out to me again at outreach@paipl.org or 412-953-5202. There's quite a bit of confusion in terms of what can and cannot be recycled and what actually does get recycled. So over the course of the last 5 years, what we can actually put in our bins has decreased significantly. In Philadelphia, you are still permitted to put number 5 food and dairy containers in your bin. But in the whole western part of the state, including southwestern PA, we can basically only recycle number 1 and 2 bottles, tubs, jars, and jugs. So those are mostly what you see pictured there. You don't really have to look for the little triangle with a number in it anymore. If it is a bottle, a tub, a jar, or a jug with a threaded lid, it is generally a plastic number 1 and 2. So you can just toss any of those items into your recycling bin without their lids, no lids, please. They must be over 2 inches in diameter, so no small pill bottles, please. And they must be less than 3 gallons. So your basic grocery store plastic bottles, jugs, and jars with threaded lids are what goes in there. Except in Philadelphia, you can still put in the number 5 food and dairy containers. So this would be cheese, hummus, baba ganoush, sour cream, dips. Those types of things are typically in number 5 containers, but we can no longer take them in the western part of the state.
Wrong.
Yeah, I'm constantly finding that. There are some areas where you can take the number 5 to a local recycler. Here, for example, we can still take them to Michael Brothers, but that's another trip. So if you go to Michael Brothers for glass recycling, then I would take them along. But the embodied energy in your car trip to just take a few number 5s is probably not. It's probably worse to drive there separately. In paper and cardboard, we are still able to recycle quite a bit because it has a value. And so in Western Pennsylvania, glass has been removed from the single stream recycling because it was contaminating the clean paper and cardboard as it was ground into a dust inside the recycling truck. But basically, any kind of paper, glossy, not glossy, color, black and white, office paper, newspapers, magazines, soft cover books, catalogs, junk mail, phone books, paperboard containers, even egg cartons and paper towel and toilet paper rolls can still be recycled. And cardboard is so valuable that the recycling truck will pretty much take any type of cardboard, but it's really helpful for them if you can flatten it, bundle it, or stack it inside smaller boxes, inside larger boxes. So this is the easy part. The plastics are the hard part. In the city of Pittsburgh, you're able to take bagged shredded paper. You cannot put shredded paper in your bin because it must be in a bag. If you put it loosely in your bin, it's going to contaminate the load. So please, if in doubt, keep it out. They have several drop-off centers in the East End, in Hazelwood, and in the West End. And many of our local municipalities, here we are in Mount Lebanon today, or Dormont, have municipally organized shredding events once a month or once a quarter. So you can watch for those and try to take your sensitive documents and paper to a shredding event, or shred it yourself and drop it off at one of your local centers. You'll see in Philadelphia later on some addresses for centers, but I did not find shredded paper on the Philadelphia recycle list. So I can't.
Now does it. They do take electronics and give you coupon toys. And I think also the shredded paper or shredded for you.
I'll bet they do. I did not have that on my list, so that's valuable. So that was Staples. Helga was saying she thinks that Staples takes shredded paper or will shred it for you.
It's definitely electronics and wires and all that. And
oh, that's great.
Discounts and coupon stores.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Pretty good deal.
I did not know that.
New, I think.
Thank you. Clean glass, as I mentioned, has unfortunately been pulled out of most municipalities except the city of Pittsburgh. So within the city of Pittsburgh, you can still put clean glass in your bin, no lid fees. And in Philadelphia, you can still put it in your bin. However, I would encourage you not to, because what's happening is it's being crushed into fine powder back to sand almost. It's very sparkly and attractive, but it's contaminating the paper and the cardboard that are in the truck. So it makes them less saleable. And then what happens when they're less saleable is they go to landfill. So the city of Pittsburgh has several drop-off centers. The Strip District along the Allegheny River at 30th Street, 3001 Railroad Street, and Construction Junction in the East End. We have now in the South Hills, the Village Square Mall has a permanent glass drop-off. Moon Township has one, and McCandless Town Hall has one. Also, Michael Brothers, which has the South Hills location and a North Hills location, takes glass, and all of the 6 City of Philadelphia sanitation convenience centers in Northeast, Northwest, Southwest Philly, Strawberry Mansion, West Philly, and Port Richmond all take glass. So if you're able to work as a congregation, an organization, or an individual to put your glass together in a large trip, maybe somebody has a truck that you can all load it into and take it. You can do it all at one time to save the gasoline of repeated trips. Just try to make one large trip to one of these glass centers. Then your glass will be recycled well. It will be recycled purely. And we've been using glass since before the Egyptians. So it's a material that will recycle forever. It doesn't have a limit to the recycling times. Number of times it can be recycled. And it's in great need by bottlers. They really want it, but they don't want it if it's ground into a fine powder. So thank you so much for trying this out. Now, we used to be able to recycle these cartons in Western Pennsylvania, but we can no longer recycle cartons here in Western Pennsylvania, but you can in Philadelphia. At least they're still telling you that they can go into your bin. That does not mean that they're actually getting recycled, but in Philadelphia, you can still put milk and juice and wine and soup containers that are in cartons into your recycling bin. In both Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Pennsylvania, you can recycle any type of metal. It's highly saleable. It's very valuable. The average aluminum can, let's say a Pepsi can, for example, uses 95% less energy than a virgin aluminum can. So it's really important to recycle all of your metal. And that can be drink cans, food cans, bottles, even empty aerosol cans. Now in Philadelphia only, they are taking aluminum baking dishes. They should be clean, but catering trays, pie plates, and takeout containers, they will still take those. The city of Pittsburgh goes back and forth on aluminum baking containers. So at this point in time, they are not taking them. So I would encourage you to use glass for baking and then wash it out or get it back from your neighbors when you're taking it to a potluck, rather than using a disposable aluminum container, because we're not sure if those ever get recycled. And then you can see, I'm going to flip through these very quickly. These are the landfill items for Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. It's terrifying, but it's pretty much all going to landfill. So take a look through those when you get the slide. So much, anything that's dirty, anything that's less than 2 inches in diameter. One thing to remember is they can't take things like lawn and garden supplies, like plastic planting pots and garden hoses. They can't take plate glass or Pyrex containers. They can't take solo cups, red solo cups, or plastic cups. So you have to look at this carefully, but those are all there. Now, yard waste varies between the city of Pittsburgh and the city of Philadelphia. So the best plan of attack is if you have a large enough yard to devote a corner or the back area of your yard to composting leaves right on site, just rake your grass, rake your leaves to a remote area of your property and mulch your grass clippings right on site when you mow your grass so you don't have to rake them and pick them up. The city of Pittsburgh has drop-off centers for leaves in the East End, Hazelwood, and the West End, but fees are required there. So the best plan is to keep them on your property, use them in your compost bin after they dry, or create a separate pile for them on their own in the back part of your yard. In the city of Philadelphia, again, mulching your grass and raking your leaves is the best plan. The leaves are collected in Philadelphia streets. They are collected here in Mount Lebanon. So we're very fortunate, but the City of Philadelphia Sanitation Convenience Centers, which I'm going to show you shortly, do take bagged leaves and they do not charge you for those. So rather than put them in landfill, it would be better to take them there if you can. They do compost them. In the city of Pittsburgh, you can drop off tires and some of the items that are shown on the left, like aluminum cans, copper wire, insulated wire, brake drums and rotators, even aluminum siding or any kind of shredded or dirty metal or tin from a car or other kind of metal device, a disassembled appliance, that sort of thing. You can drop those off at the City of Pittsburgh drop-off centers. Now, so the sanitation convenience centers in the city of Philadelphia are shown with addresses here. They have a number of services that are offered at all of the centers. Like they'll take all of your electronic and universal waste, your yard waste. They will take your single stream recycling and they will take source separated recycling, including your glass at those locations. They will also take tagged items, like large items like sofas and mattresses and those sorts of things, and hazardous waste, chemicals and paint that you cannot put into the landfill or the trash. They will take them there, but each one of those sites, except for the 4 lines above the blue text, they have different requirements at each center for tagged and hazardous waste items. So I encourage you to check their website or call those particular locations for a comprehensive list. In Western Pennsylvania, we rely quite a bit on the Pennsylvania Resources Council for their collection events. They have electronics recycling and hazardous waste or chemical collection events at various times of the year. They're typically about once a month in Western PA, and they're scattered around Allegheny County, Beaver County, and Butler County. So there are a number of places you can go. You can also drop off your electronics and chemical waste at the City of Pittsburgh Strip District site by appointment only. Now in Philadelphia, the Pennsylvania Resources Council has a limited number of collection events. This one happened to be on the right, happened to be for an electronics recycling event. But as Helga mentioned, please check your local office supply stores like Staples and Best Buy and your municipalities for collection events that they might have individually, because oftentimes your municipal staff has arranged those to happen on a regular basis. So when you talk about hard to recycle in Philadelphia, we're talking about tires. They'll actually take 4 per day, and they will take household appliances, even as large as refrigerators. They'll take your Christmas trees or other plants They'll take trash if you need to drop it off rather than put it out. They'll take a lot of electronic waste or universal waste such as computers, monitors, and televisions. They'll take paints if it's been solidified with kitty litter or a synthetic absorbent material, mattresses, yard waste, and even light bulbs and batteries, lead acid batteries, lithium batteries, and rechargeable batteries. So that's pretty comprehensive in terms of the batteries. You're very fortunate in the city of Philadelphia to have this available to you at no cost. And then one item that we seem to have so much of on a regular basis is the clean and dry plastic film. It coats everything, it packages everything from plastic bags to newspapers to dry cleaning to supermarkets. So we talked earlier about some ways you can eliminate this by using your own bags, different kinds of containers instead of plastic bags, but there is going to be a large amount of plastic still in your life. So there are a number of retail stores that now take this back for you as long as it's clean and dry. And so most of your supermarkets, big box stores like Lowe's and Home Depot, those kind of stores will take that back for you.
I think Giant Eagle has a plastic bag bin sitting out.
Yeah. Here we have Giant Eagle, Whole Foods, Lowe's, Home Depot, Target takes that. So I think those are the big ones, or the statewide stores. If you have clean white packing foam, now that we're moving towards the holidays where people are going to be buying gifts that might be electronic devices, and they come packaged to protect them from damage in clean white packing foam, or even clean white coolers if you have those that look like this. There are a number of places you can take that. In Western PA, we have Appliance Warehouse on the south side on 6th Street, Nova Chemicals in the Beaver Valley in Monaca, and in Philadelphia, you can take that to the Northeast Philadelphia Convenience Center on State Road. There's a wonderful organization in Philadelphia called Green Philly, and I am providing the link for that in this presentation. So you can go to the Green Philly website, and they will give you a comprehensive guide to complement this presentation. And stay in touch with Green Philly because they have great information on their site for you about all sorts of conservation methods. So after today, you're definitely ready to be a role model. As we discussed with Pamela, please feel free to reach out if you need additional tips on how you can encourage people, your neighbors, your friends, your congregational members, your office workers to join you. Typically, the best way to do that is to start a small environmental team, a climate action team, a green team. And with that group of committed individuals, you can take baby steps. Maybe you don't want to start with composting right away. Maybe you'll start with recycling first and show how simple and easy that can be with the items that you have at your disposal. But it would be wonderful if you could start with composting right away. And I'd be happy to try to walk you through it in greater detail with your whole team if you need to. But typically, if we're successful in small ways, then we can work up toward bigger projects that either require more time, more labor, or more money. And we can working within our organizations with dedicated people is the best way to start. So please, just by joining us today, you definitely made a difference, and you've gone a long way towards preventing this beautiful farmland from becoming a landfill. Thank you very much for your time. Our assistant rector here, Erin Moray, is going to lead us in a closing reflection, and I'm going to put her on camera. So, thank you, Erin.
All right, thank you for joining us here today. And this is a reflection from the Buddhist tradition. May I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for all who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles. And to the boundless multitude of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and sky, until all beings are freed from sorrow and all are awakened. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. That was beautiful. There. And thank you all for joining us today. It's great to see your smiling faces. Please, again, feel free to reach out. Leave my contact information up here on the page on the recording. I hope to see you all in December when we'll be joined by Dr. Patty DeMarco, one of PA IPL's board members, for a presentation entitled The Healing Spirit of the Earth. Have a great week. Bye-bye.